neuroscience, quantum physics, biology, plant medicine, non-dual tantric meditative practices. We will be exploring these concepts with experts to provide insight. Get ready to melt reality with us. Welcome. Today we're here with Dr. Richard Miller, who is a clinical psychologist, author, researcher, yogic scholar, and spiritual teacher. For over 40 years, Richard has devoted his life and work to integrating the non-dual wisdom teachings of yoga, Tantra, Ayurveda, Taoism, Buddhism, and Western psychology. Richard is the founding president and CEO of IRES Institute, co-founder of the International Association of Yoga Therapy, and founding editor of the professional journal IAYT. Richard is also serves as a research consultant studying IRES Yoga Nidra protocol that he has developed, researching its effectiveness on health, healing, well-being with a wide range of diverse populations, including the Veterans Administration. The Yoga Nidra protocol is approved by the Surgeon General and is currently being taught in VA hospitals all across the country to address post-traumatic stress disorder. Welcome, Richard. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jody. And nice to meet you, David.
So you are an absolute pioneer in the area of consciousness and meditation research. And I wondered if you can just share just the start of your journey, like what inspired you in this work and what especially inspired you to connect research with mystical experience.
Sure. It's always a mystery how we get involved in these. Really, it started in 1970 when I was new to San Francisco wanting to meet people. I happened to take a yoga class thinking it might be a nice way to meet people who were not just in the bar scene, but, had a healthy lifestyle. And little did I know the class would be taught in silence. So we entered the building in silence, left the building in silence. But that first evening at the end of the yoga class, the teacher taught what I now know as a rudimentary yoga nidra meditation. And I had a profound transformative experience. I had walked in feeling a bit isolated, alienated, depressed from my previous life, you might say, of years. I walked out feeling totally tranquil, peaceful, at one with the universe. The depression was gone, the sense of isolation, alienation, totally gone. And I remember walking home thinking, number one, what just happened? How do I find out more about it? And who do I, begin to investigate this with? Well, several months later, I happened to meet a woman who had just come to the United States from the Far East. I began studying with her to learn the art of psychotherapy. And it turned out she grew up in a Buddhist community, taught yoga by her mom, had an existential phenomenological background with studies with Eric Fromm personally and an associate of R.D. Laing. So it was a perfect relationship for me to begin to explore these experiences and integrate them also into my psychology practice as I gained experience. Along the way, I grew up in a medical family and I would read medical books falling asleep, you might say. It was just something that I enjoyed. And so I was always interested in this cutting edge between medicine, neuroscience, and the studies I was doing both in psychology. And then I got involved in the studies of yoga and Advaita and non-dualism along the way. And then I had the opportunity to co-found a journal, as you mentioned, the Journal of the International Association of Yoga Therapists, where I highlighted articles that were from different medical journals around the world, looking at their insights into what might be happening when we do these practices of meditation or yoga nidra or yoga. So it's just been in my blood as a small child. I don't know if you remember, I actually remember the first time I would say I came into a sense of separate self, where a moment before I was maybe 18 months of age, There was no sister, no room, no bed. And all of a sudden, my sister appears, the bed, the walls, the window, the door, the ceiling. I can remember it as if it happened yesterday. I think that started actually me on my journey, because I always had the joke. I think that's the moment I started suffering.
Yes.
Because that sense of separation began a real inquiry in me of what just happened, in a way, and how do I get back to where I was before that moment of separation? And so my entire journey has really been about healing separation, first in myself. And then I have had so many wonderful opportunities, say, as you mentioned, to work with the VA at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, many VAs around the country now and around the world, and with so many different populations, from the homeless, domestic violence folks, to veterans coming back from war fronts. So it's been an incredible journey.
Wow, that's really incredible, Richard. Talk a little bit about what attracted you, particularly as a psychologist, to all of these various modalities and techniques that you've pursued over the course of your career.
Yeah. I was really fortunate to have 5 solid years with this person who had recently come from the Far East. So we really had long, engaging conversations about the intersection of Far Eastern philosophies like Buddhism, Zen, and to really understand them, I started practicing. So I sat in Mahayana Buddhist practices. I met a Zen teacher and sat in a number of sesshins, started taking yoga, because I wanted to firsthand understand in myself, how did these practices influence my own life? And what I found was they really helped me both heal this sense of separation that our sense of self engenders from a very early age. And also, because I was working in a psychotherapeutic modality, with her help, we were looking at how do we integrate these understandings into people's psychology, you might say. And so, like, I just came back from teaching an annual 10-day retreat. I'd say 50% of the people in the room had trauma. And I know that as we meditate, it is liberating the entire content of consciousness into present awareness. So we need both the psychological skills of how do we process that unprocessed material. And we've all been wounded in one way or another as we grow up. So how do we use the psychological approach, which has been well honed in a Western world, with, I think, incredible approaches and interventions from the meditative realm. And when we put them together, we are able to have tremendous transformative healings across the spectrum of people feeling no longer isolated, alienated, or separate within themselves. When they look out from these practices at a tree, at another human being, they're connecting with an underlying essence that we all share in common. And they're learning how then to have skillful means for working with these long embedded, we might say, traumatic experiences that they need to heal in order to feel, as a complete human being. So I really do value the early years I had in my training. I was very fortunate to meet a mentor who herself was a very awake individual and was able to skillfully mentor me both into my own healing and into these, very time-honored practices.
Yeah, there's right now an enormous amount of suffering among young people. The highest rate of suicide in American history is among young girls in high school. A type of self-loathing. There's a lawsuit going right now with social media about the kind of negative messaging that attaches a girl's esteem externally.
Yeah.
And so I would love for you to share with our audience, like, tell us what Yoga Nidra is and how you discovered it and how it's beneficial.
Yeah, just to dive off of what you were just saying, social media had so many wonderful promises to connect us, but unfortunately, they've had a tremendous load of these negative effects where people get trolled and develop these negative self-images that are enhanced through social medias, which is very unfortunate. The practice of Yoga Nidra, fortunately, is able to help people in a way peel off those self-images and meet themselves in a whole new way that they can heal those kinds of wounds that come. Yoga, I take the word to mean someone who is living somatically embodied in a sense that they recognize an underlying essence that everything is, we might say, made out of. The underlying essence, I like to think, birthed the entire cosmos in all of us. So yoga means the interventions that help a person really feel that they're in touch with that underlying essence that heals a sense of separation, even as they're able to continue to see separate objects around them. We can still relate as you and I are. Nidra is an interesting word because it means sleep, but it means or infers a state of changing consciousness, something that comes and goes. So it could be sleep, dream, dreamlessness, but it also means states while we're angry, sad, depressed, happy, joyful. So it means a changing state of consciousness. So when you chain these two words together, Yoga Nidra, it means a set of practices that we engage to really feel an embodied sense of non-separateness, no matter the changing state of consciousness that may be present. Even the Buddha, who was wide awake, said, you still have a body, you're still going to feel comfort and discomfort, you're still going to feel satisfaction and dissatisfaction. We learn how to meet these without any sense of aversion or attachment to states of consciousness, and we learn how to navigate them through the practices of what I would call Yoga Nidra.
Yeah, I think it helps with the negative spinning mind, with veterans coming back and seeing images. It just quiets that landscape down.
Well, it quiets the mind. And what I see is it helps them realize that the narrative that they're caught in, while it has emotional and cognitive aspects to it, I liken it to a cloud that has descended and they feel caught in it. And through the practices, that cloud can become more up above them and they're down, not caught in it. So they can still relate to their history and what happened. But I've worked with people who've been in tremendous car accidents, plane accidents, acts of war and terrorism. They're able to heal through the narrative so they can kind of remember this happened, but it's lost all the emotional charge. And even some people will start to say, did that really happen? When it loses so much of its emotional and cognitive charge.
So the scientist in me, Richard, is always looking for the evidence, right? We have all these kinds of these ways of helping and promoting wellness, but which ones of them work and which ones of them don't have evidence that they work. But I understand you've done a lot of research studies using Yoga Nidra as a therapeutic modality. And I'd be curious if you can tell us.
You know, as you say that, David, I had a number of yogis when I was learning from them. And I would say, so this is going to be transformative. And they said, yes, just trust me. And I realized I don't trust my mind and I don't trust anybody. I want to see the science. So I wanted to get involved in research that would show, do these actual work, do what they say they will. And I'm glad to see that they actually do. So the studies we've done with PTSD, anxiety, depression, sleep, well-being, across the board, we've got about 35 studies and there are about 10 going on right now. We see that it works. And what I've really loved is we've kept the protocol the same through each study. And so with each population we've worked with, and with which each issue we've worked with, we've seen the same result. The trend lines where we want to see them in the positive are in the positive. The trend lines where we want to see them in the negative are in the negative. So reduced anxiety, reduced depression, enhanced well-being, enhanced locus of control within. And that was something right off the bat that a lot of the veterans that I worked with who felt at the beginning of their studies, they felt radically out of control in their life. They'd been through awful experiences. At the end of the studies, they'd say, you know, I realize I am out of control and now I'm comfortable with it. I can work with the situations that I was in. It was quite interesting results we see across the board.
That's great. That's great. Can you give me any kind of sense of how it compares to sort of other modalities of treatment, whether it be pharmaceutical or other, methods, other methods? Is there any sense that you have of how well these techniques work?
Well, it was nice when we were doing studies at the Miami VA. We have a number of vets who reported going off or decreasing actually their medications. So we were seeing that we were getting the results that the medications actually weren't really getting. And even for people with diabetes, they found that they needed less insulin because they were under less stress. So they weren't processing sugars in their body the way they normally would. We haven't done apples to oranges studies like comparing iRest, Yoga Nidra, say, to a psychotherapeutic modality. We just see in the studies we've done, which haven't had a comparison other therapeutic modality, we're getting similar results, for instance, I would say. And I would love to see some comparative studies.
That's wonderful. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and you have a book called, I believe it's Yoga Nidra for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder that's been out and very helpful.
Yeah, it's the iRest program for healing PTSD through New Harbinger. And then I have another book, Yoga Nidra, the iRest meditation for health, healing, and well-being. That's through Sounds True. And I'm writing a couple of other books as I speak.
I mean, I would say, and we're going to talk more about suffering, like I people of all ages, all situations, learning this fundamental technique that they can do in the morning or when they get home from work will really be transformative. It's just a really fundamental tool in one's life.
Well, I like to think of it, Jody, as a toolbox we're giving to people. And while the protocol, as I developed it, has 10 different tools, they can be used independently or combined together. So we're giving people things that they can use for the rest of their life to manage both their psychological life and, if it's interesting to them, to really enhance their spiritual or religious life. And I really like when people come from different spiritual or religious traditions, whether it's Catholicism, Judaism, Muslim, atheism, yoga, whatever, they've all said it has enhanced their own understanding of their religion or their spiritual. So we're trying to teach what I think of as secular tools that anybody is going to use to enhance their own understanding, both of themselves and the philosophical or spiritual orientation that they're embedded in, which I think is really important because we want to enhance a person's own ability within themselves, but we don't want to take them out of their spiritual or their philosophical stance. We want to help them really dive into it and understand it at a deeper level. At a deeper level,
yes. Well, of course, you and I are good, dear friends with the Hugheses and the tradition of non-dual Tantra. And I wondered if you could talk to our audience a little bit about what non-duality might be, what that that dual state and that non-dual state might be.
And I think as much as I can talk about it, let me see if I can actually give listeners a little taste, because I think the taste of an apple is better than describing an apple for many hours.
Perfect.
If we look around the room or the environment where we are and we see an object, like I'm looking at a chair that's out in front of me, our mind tends to call it a chair And when the mind calls it a chair, it creates a separate object over there and me as the seer who is separate of that object. If I look at the chair, and I invite everybody who's listening to look at some object, but don't name it, our relationship starts to immediately change when we don't label or conceptualize the so-called objects around us, and we will begin to feel something unique, where there's some underlying essence that what we're looking at in ourself shares in common. And that begins to heal this sense of conceptual separation that we've inherited through this function in our brain we call the ego or the sense of self. It actually doesn't exist. It's a superimposition that has grown up over probably many, many thousands of years. But if we go looking for a sense of me or I, we can't find it. For instance, if we really stop, especially initially with our eyes closed, and sense the body, we can't actually find a body. We can find different sensations, but we don't find actually a boundary that the eyes and perceptual sensory modalities impose upon our consciousness. So what's happening when we engage different approaches of meditation that come out of these traditions, like you mentioned the Kashmir non-dual, the Advaita or the yoga tradition? They're giving us inquiries where we are going in and we're actually challenging our belief systems, we might say. So one of the beliefs we have is, I'm a me, separate from you. But if I actually inquire deeply and go looking for a me, I can't find actually a me. If I go looking for a perceiver, I can find perceptions, but I actually can't find a perceiver. And as we do that, we find shifts that happen that as we come back and we look at, as we were a moment ago, the objects around us, we begin to thin out that sense of separation that we carry with us. Now, in a way, we're living in simultaneity of worlds. We can see a separate object. I'm relating to you. You look very much over there. And there's something here that feels local over here. And yet I can feel an underlying essence that, in a way, if I peel off the personality Jody and the personality David, there's an essence we share in common. And this is the non-dual or not separate essence that we discover. And it has tremendous ramifications in our psychological and relational world, because as we peel off these conceptual ways we've come to believe and formulate our worlds of a sense of separation, and we see other in a way as self, conflict begins to peel off. We can still celebrate differences because we're each unique, but it doesn't make sense to be in conflict anymore. And we stop being so averse to life or attached to life. In other words, most people, in a normal human being, they want more of things that make them feel good and less of things that make them feel bad. With meditation, we're able to take things just as they are. Doesn't mean we don't still feel comfort or discomfort or like or dislike, but we lose the reactions. And if we look at a lot of our relationships, it is not really essence to essence. It's more image to image. We meet someone, we hold them captive in an image that our mind has created. And so every time we meet them out of that image. With the non-dual perspective, when we're really embodying it, in a way, we meet a person fresh, moment to moment. It doesn't mean we still can't consult history, but there's a freshness. So in a way, the images keep falling away. And they fall away here, they fall away there. And so it keeps us really in a fresh lovely aliveness, very dynamic, but with a deep sense of joy and equanimity in each moment, even I might say in the most challenging moments, which we're all going to experience. But we've learned a way of navigating that doesn't have reaction in it. And I think even our listeners, if they're in relationship, how many times a day, a week, a month, or a year do you find yourself in a reactive moment, either with your spouse, a child, or at work, or even somebody in the street? All the road rages that are going on is just basically people reacting to the moment, wishing it weren't the way it is.
Right.
And I always like to make the statement here, which is some people feel, well, then I'll just be kind of like an even blob, and I won't be so, engaged in life. And it's so far from the truth. Actually, you're more engaged, you're more present. You're just willing to be with life as it is, not in some make-believe conceptual world that the mind wishes things were. So it just makes for a happier, more delightful, but very dynamic life.
Yeah, I feel it's sort of a more sensory in the moment experience, because when history and memory calm down, and one is really present in the moment, it's very exciting. It's beautiful. It's breathtaking. Even the arising of emotions that come up without history and memory, the feeling of them that takes over, is a practice. Mm-hmm. And so if you can let emotions rise up without all the history and the storytelling and be the observer, then life and its challenges aren't as challenging.
Yeah, and I like to think or say it's very simple. I don't think it's easy because we get caught in our history. But the moment we start having actual somatic glimpses of what we are calling no separation, it has a life-changing aspect to it. And, we just become very curious in how to get more of this peace that we just touched.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. Building on that a little bit, as a brain scientist, someone who studies the brain and its role in, behavior and cognition, I'm very interested in your thoughts about concepts being proposed by people like Bernardo Kastrup or Rupert Spira as it relates to the notion of an idealism view of the world versus a materialism view of the world. Specifically, the theory that consciousness could be the fundamental makeup of reality as opposed to material and energy. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your view on that, on those two different ways of looking at the world? And I think it builds upon what we were just talking about.
Yeah. I think we're living in a paradox. It does appear material. I mean, I cannot find objection that I can say that I don't have a body, but I'm not about to have you put a hot coal on my hand. There's a reality to this object. The chair in front of me, I don't know really what it is. I can call it a chair, and there's a consensual reality. We call it a chair. But if I really stop, do I really know what this is? No. And if I can live with it from that perspective, it changes my relationship to things. Consciousness is such a loaded word, isn't it? So mm-hmm. How do we define it? I love a slightly different word. Mm. I like the word mystery, actually. If I look at things from a quality of mystery, and I really inquire into the nature of the universe and the understanding that the universe doesn't have an underlying cause. There's no first cause to the universe. It's been here, period. Now, our mind can't understand that. But if it's so, and there is something here that has given rise to everything, then everything is a part of that underlying essence. Whether it's a chair or a tree or a rock or each one of us. So I subscribe, and I don't know if you would call that an idealism, but to an underlying essence that I feel very strong that I would call mystery. And that consciousness itself has evolved out of that mystery, and as has all the material world. So I'm able to see both a material world of material objects, but an underlying essence or building blocks that have assembled that material world. And if we take apart a chair, we just find atoms. And if we take apart atoms, we find space. If we take apart a human body, we find atoms, and atoms lead to just space. So ultimately, I fall back to there's a mystery here that our brain I don't see how it could ever understand something that has no first cause, that has always existed. And yet, if I am an aspect that has been birthed out of that, I have the possibility that I can actually experience it. And that's what I feel meditation does. It enables us to experience that underlying essence. But at the end of the day, all we can say about it is, it's a mystery. That's how I would answer your question, David.
I love it.
And as a neuroscience, I love knowing that in the brain we have, the default network that creates a sense of self and other, and meditation can help us downregulate the default network. We have areas in the brain that if we stimulate them, we step out of time and space. We feel ourselves everywhere. There's another area of the brain, if we stimulate it, we step out of our narrative. And I think meditation helps us access these areas so that we can both have time and space and a narrative, and yet we can simultaneously realize there is no such thing as time or space or narrative. And so we live in a wonderful paradox, in a quality of mystery, moment to moment, that I feel is very alive and dynamic.
I got to say, I think that's a very satisfying answer. I love it. I think it's great. No, really, I really do. I really like it. Thank you.
Well, it does, doesn't it? It allows us to surf all these areas of neuroscience and materialism and these non-material aspects like consciousness and awareness. Isn't it fascinating? We're all aware, but when I ask someone, so talk to me about awareness, they start naming the objects that are in awareness. And when I ask them, okay, so you're aware of this object? Yes. So what does awareness feel like? That's a very interesting inquiry when somebody really starts to inquire, well, what does awareness feel like? It will put them into a non-dual state very, very quickly. And then the narrative will disrupt that non-dual state. And so it's learning how to step enough out of the narrative where we can really explore these non-dual states that are available to all of us. I have a process, for instance, I started with veterans. They've come back from terrible experiences, or someone who's been in a car accident or physical or psychological trauma or abuse as a child. And they feel that something's wrong with them. Something's been broken. Something's unable to be healed. They'll never get back to where they were. And I have a 5-step process that I take them through. It takes just a few minutes, and they can have a very quick glimpse of something within them that's never been hurt, never been harmed, doesn't need healing. And it gives them a solid inner resource ground from which then to work with what does need healing. And as one vet from Miami said, every intervention he had been in up until ours had always started with what was wrong with him. He said, you're the first intervention that started helping me see what's right about me, and knowing what's right, I can now face what does need healing. And I think if we can help a person break out of the notion that there's something wrong with them to there's something wrong here, but you're okay. Now we can use that basic ground of okayness to look at what does need to be healed or what's broken. And I have yet to find anybody within 10 minutes or 15 minutes that can't have a glimpse of that what I call innate wholeness that lives in all of us.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, especially, in view of what I described earlier as a younger generation having self-loathing and the increased rate of suicide among young people, young girls. It's the highest in history. This fundamental, what I call whole preciousness that sits right here, is extraordinary. I love to talk to executives about walking into a boardroom as a billion cells of vibrating potentiality, as opposed to with their agenda and their anxiety and what they have to prove of themselves, which is always a quality of maybe I'm not good enough. What does it feel like to enter a room and just feel oneself? They are present, whole, open-hearted, and see what comes. And so I know in the corporate world, there's a shift in executives when they experience themselves in their wholeness without their agenda so much.
Well, so many modalities, they start from you're broken or there's something wrong. Let's see if we can fix it. And now we've got a future timeline set out. How long is it going to take me to get to that place of healing? If we can introduce a person in the first time we're with them to a sense of wholeness within themselves, now we're healing not to get to be whole, but from wholeness itself. And now we're not on a timeline of how do I get back to where I want it. We're already there.
Right.
But there's still things we need to do to create that sense of healing, or as you're saying, to peel off the self-image of hatred or loathing. That does take time because it's been reinforced in the brain.
Right.
But it's possible to step out of it, especially when we're able to confront it from a deeper place of wholeness.
Yeah. Beautiful. So you have really created incredible organizations, one after another, and your yoga community and everything. Richard, can you share a little bit about what you're working on now, what IRES is doing, and what you'd like to share with our listeners?
It's beautiful because we've trained some 5,000-6,000 teachers. We're in 25 countries now. As you were saying, we're in some 75 at last count VA sites across the United States, which is wonderful. So the Institute is really founded on training teachers and getting them out there. We're now coming into several new industries. We're coming into cybersecurity.
Oh, wow.
Because of the cyber attacks that are happening all over the world, the cyber workers are completely stressed out. They've got a 35% or higher burnout, and their CISOs, their chief supervisors, are burning out within 24 months. And
wow,
it takes almost 10 years to train a supervisor. So for each one they lose, it's a highly, it's a real hard point for the organization. And every cyber worker that turns away from their job, it's a lack of morale then, and it's a collapse of the team. So in Australia, we have what's called Cyber Minds. We're now creating that. We've launched it in the United States, and in September, we launch it in Great Britain, where we're coming into the cyber industry, both in the corporate world, like PayPal or Alliance insurance companies, but also in government and military. So we're working right now actually with people who are helping to defend the cyber workers in Ukraine, or who are helping work against attacks that are, say, coming in the United States or Great Britain. So that's one area which is really exciting. So we're creating courses for cyber. I'm coming into the healthcare industry, so I'm working with a clinic right now that sees anywhere from 80 to 125 children a day with cancer.
Oh, my goodness.
The stresses on the medical personnel, even the admin. You go into one room where a child has just been diagnosed. From that, you go into another room where you have to tell the parents that there's nothing now we can do for your child. And you go into the next room where a child is now celebrating remission. And the stress from going from room to room to room all day long and working with the families is tremendous. So we're coming in and we're doing research to see how my protocol helps reduce the stress in the staff,
Oh my
in
gosh.
the medical facility. And then we're going to look at it with the actual children and the families as well. So that's
Amazing.
another industry. We're looking at establishing new institutes in different countries so that they can carry the work forward. And then me personally, playing a little bit more,
Great.
taking a vacation to Paris.
Oh, I love
I've
it.
got 5 books that I'm working on.
Wow. Wow, Richard. Wow.
But so life is very full, but very exciting. And, you know, I get letters constantly just being in the retreat where I was with people, and then to see the transformation that happens in people's lives when they come in so broken and, as you say, with adolescence, with such self-loathing, and to see that clear away and people open up into their basic humanness, which we all have and should have the right to live in. So
Yeah.
lots of promise, challenges from COVID, which really decimated us. We had 52 events going on worldwide. With COVID, we had 3.
Oh
and they
my.
were all on Zoom.
Oh my.
So we're in that,
Wow.
you know, beginning to come back and expand again.
For sure. For sure.
But
Well,
the good news is now, where I would give a training and people would be flying in from all over the world. Now I give a training, it's hybrid. I got people in the room and I've got people from all over the world who come in by Zoom who otherwise wouldn't have been able to take the training. So
yeah, for sure. And what's beautiful, if people listening, Richard has incredible training program. If you're a yoga teacher or if you're in the therapeutic industry, to become an IRES certified teacher.
that reminds me. The other industry that we are really working hard on is to bring it into the psychotherapists to really help them enhance their skill levels that they are working with their clients. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course you have the certification for it. So just as we wrap up here, it's been an incredible conversation. Your work is just so inspiring. And I think we touched on suffering. And, you know, I just, as we leave here, I wondered what you could say to any listener who's listening that is dealing with a challenge now, and you know, what can you leave them with, and what are your thoughts about immediate things they can do?
There is a way that we can all very quickly touch into this place that feels whole. And I mean, I have a 10-15 minute meditation. I can actually send it to you guys and you can give it out to people. That can help a person touch that place of wholeness. I worked with a person some years ago who came in severely depressed and been through so many treatment programs. And I asked her if she would be willing to make that experiment in the first few minutes of our time together. And she did have a glimpse of her wholeness. And then from that wholeness, we started looking at her depression. She came back the next week for our second time together. And what she said, I think, is what was inspiring, what I want to pass on. She said, you know, the glimpse that I got when I was with you that last session, it faded and the depression came back. She said, no, it's the first time I realized there's hope that I can get through this. And I think that's what we want to inspire in people, that there is hope, no matter the suffering, the trauma, no matter how many decades a person has been in it, and whether it's depression, anxiety, trauma, from whatever, there's the hope and the possibility we can navigate through it and come out the other side a stronger human being. And then, as Buddha so beautifully said, we become light, not just to ourselves, but to those around us, and we can pass on that kind of good news and hope.
So beautiful. We would love to share that practice. We'll have it in our show notes, Richard.
Great.
And thank you for your time today. It's just been such a joy and just so much learning. And we're just grateful that you visited with us today.
Well, nice hanging out with you, Jody, and you, David. I'd love to do a little bit more neuroscience.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. It was a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for being our guest today.
Yeah, thank you. And wonderful program. Good fortune with it. Thank you very much for having me.
Hi, I'm Sana Tor, a neuroscience student just finishing up my second year at Fordham University. I'm here to share some transcendent experiences that friends of mine have had, either with mind-expanded substances, dreams, or other types of direct experiences. Today, I'll present an experience that my friend Maggie has shared with me. I dabbed with a 250 milligram tab of LSD at the ripe age of 16. I started with taking only half of the small square, then proceeded to take the rest in hopes that I would feel something. What I didn't know is that for the next 8 hours, I would be experiencing a full-fledged psychedelic trip. Within the first hour, I could feel my perception of time and space slowly morph. It sounds cliché, but in the first few hours of my trip, LSD caused me to see patterns in the sky and all over my body. These geometrical shapes were flowing down my arm. Organic swirls and diamonds formed everywhere. They appeared ancient to me, resembling some sort of genetic coding. Then, soon after, the trip took a hard turn. Grace by Lil Baby and 42 Dugg started playing, and as soon as I heard the faint whistle in the background come in, something within me clicked. Every emotion was firing rapidly in my brain. Usually, humans cry due to immense thoughts or an outside force that causes the emotion. But in this instance, tears just poured out of me without any explanation. I remember I did feel immense gratitude, confusion, sadness, and love at the same time, all within this 3-minute-long song. It was refreshing to just release emotion. As I bawled my eyes out for no valid reason, I began to feel extremely present. I kept saying, I am in the now. I am the future. It's overwhelming. What do I do with myself? I am here, right now, 2020. I'm at the peak of history. I'm at the peak of life. I literally shed a layer of my brain that day. Taking in all that had happened was a lot to unpack. The fact that I peaked a Lil Baby still makes me laugh to this day. It's not really how I planned to trip, but that's what psychedelics are all about. You never know what the ride will be like. I finished my day listening to Purity by Frank Ocean and A$AP Rocky. It calmed me immensely, and as I closed my eyes to go to sleep, my mind's eye was still racing with meaningless visuals, looping on and on. I woke up the next morning, Easter Sunday. After that day, my life would not be the same.
Now it's time to play with perception, identity, and the ego and melt reality. For today's practice, we're going to practice Dharana number 49 from the Vijnana Bhairava. It's a very simple and precious practice. So please turn off your phone and sit comfortably in a chair and close your eyes. Now, I want you to imagine a joyful memory, a joyful place, a peaceful place, a place that fills you with peacefulness. Just imagine that in your mind's eye and take yourself there in this place of real, simple peacefulness. Perhaps it's on a veranda or by the beach or by a lake. Immerse yourself in this quality of peacefulness, but in fact, be peaceful. Become immersed, non-separated from the experience of peacefulness itself, and sit there unending. As thoughts arise, push them away and feel the grounding of peace fill you up like an ocean overflowing. You are filled with peace. There's nothing else to do here, no past, no future. You are the essence, the overflowing of peacefulness. Without a break, feel that experience of peace. When you feel ready, just begin to wiggle your toes a little bit. This practice can be done anytime you feel agitated. Your mind creates your reality. And so if you're in an agitated state, you can call in peace, unending, uninterrupted, a state of peace at any time. To learn more, visit lja.yoga, and I'll see you on the next meditation. The music you have been listening to is actually my consciousness in motion. To create this hypnotic music, Marsha Britskaya of Nextvox and her team connected musical notes to the frequency of my brainwaves from gamma to delta. The team at Nextvox will be exploring how listening to your own brainwaves can provide health benefits from reducing your blood pressure to calming anxiety. Visit our show notes to learn more about Nextvox.
Exploring Reality Maybe is written, produced, fact-checked, and edited by Jody R. Weiss and David Schwartz. Research support is provided by Semicolon Connects. Music produced by Nextvox. Visit our website at exploringrealitymaybe.org to find show notes, transcripts, bios, and to learn more. If you like the show, please visit our website to donate.